Mafia boss saves her, then makes him regret. She'd been tied to the column for 26 minutes, zip ties cutting into her wrists, duct tape sealing her mouth shut, blood running from a gash above her left eye into the concrete beneath her. The parking garage was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant thud of music from the ballroom 6 floors above, where the man who did this was delivering a keynote speech about protecting women from violence. Then footsteps. Slow. Measured. A man stepped around the corner, saw her, and stopped. He didn't call for help. He pulled a knife from his pocket and cut her free. Danya Voronova was beaten and tied up in a parking garage by the man giving a speech about protecting women 6 floors above her. And the man who just cut her free, subscribe and hit that bell, because what comes next will burn. Danya Voronova was 25 years old and 11 months into a relationship that had started with standing ovations and ended with zip ties. She met Keir Aldrin at a fundraiser for the Atlanta Children's Advocacy Center. She was a graduate social work student at Emory. He was the keynote speaker. He gave a speech about survivor advocacy that moved half the room to tears, and Danya was one of them. He was articulate, passionate, magnetic, the kind of man who made you believe the world could be repaired because he was standing in it holding a wrench. They were engaged within 5 months. Danya moved into his Buckhead penthouse. She told her classmates she'd found someone who understood the work the way she did. She was right about one thing. Keir understood the work. He understood it the way a locksmith understands a door. Not to open it, to make sure it stayed shut. Keir Aldrin was 43, prominent Atlanta defense attorney specializing in domestic violence cases. His face was on billboards across the city. Every voice deserves a champion. He consulted with state legislators on abuse prevention policy. He sat on the boards of 3 survivor organizations. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution had profiled him twice. He was the man the city pointed to when it wanted to believe the system worked. Behind the penthouse door, the system worked exactly the way Keir designed it. The first 3 months were perfect. Attentive, generous, the kind of love that makes a woman feel like the center of the universe. By month 4, the universe contracted. He convinced her advisor at Emory that Danya was experiencing a mental health crisis. A private conversation full of concern, just enough detail to trigger a mandatory leave of absence. She came home confused, and Keir was sympathetic. "Take some time," he said. "I'll take care of everything." He did. He canceled her personal phone and gave her one he monitored. He moved her finances into a joint account he controlled. He chose her clothing. He scheduled her days. And when she disagreed about anything, the temperature of the apartment, the length of her skirt, the way she answered the door, his hand found her throat before she could finish the sentence. He hit where clothes covered. He timed the bruises around his public calendar. Never before a gala, never before a press appearance. The violence was as scheduled as his meetings. Danya learned to read his moods the way a sailor reads weather. Pressure changes, shifts in temperature, the particular silence that meant a storm was building behind his teeth. Tonight the storm had broken open. They arrived at the hotel for his charity fundraiser, the Atlanta Children's Advocacy Center annual gala. In the elevator, Danya told him she was leaving. She said it quietly, firmly, the way she'd practiced in the bathroom mirror for 3 weeks while he was at the office. Keir pressed the garage button. The elevator descended past the lobby, past the ground floor, into the basement parking level. The doors opened to concrete and fluorescent light and the empty hum of a place designed for cars, not conversations. He dragged her to the far corner by her hair. The first blow caught her above the left eye. She hit the support column and her vision went white. He hit her again. And again. Methodical, precise. The beating of a man who wasn't out of control, who was exercising it. When she couldn't stand, he zip-tied her wrists around the column, pulled the ties tight enough to cut, taped her mouth, straightened his tie, checked his cuffs, looked down at her the way a man looks at luggage he'll collect on his way out. "Don't go anywhere, sweetheart. We're not done." He took the elevator back up, walked into the ballroom, took the stage, began his keynote about the importance of believing survivors. The audience applauded. 6 floors below, Danya tasted blood and felt her wrists go numb and listened to the muffled sound of a room full of people celebrating the man who had just beaten her unconscious. Onyx Saran was not supposed to be in that garage. He was 37 years old. He ran Atlanta's underground with a discipline that bordered on surgical, ports, logistics, territory. And he didn't attend charity galas. He didn't shake hands with politicians. He moved through the city like a current beneath the surface. He owned the hotel through a holding company, and he was checking a renovation issue in the basement when he heard a sound that stopped him mid-step. A muffled scream, caught behind duct tape, coming from the parking level. He followed it. He found her tied to the column, blood on concrete, one shoe missing, dress torn. He didn't call for help. He read the scene in 3 seconds. The zip ties, the tape, the precision of the restraints. This wasn't random violence. This was ownership. He crouched in front of her. She flinched, hard, automatic, the recoil of a woman bracing for the next blow. He waited, let her see his face. Then he peeled the tape from her mouth slowly, carefully, pulling it from split lips like he understood that carelessness has its own kind of cruelty. He cut the zip ties. "Can you stand?" She tried, her legs buckled. He lifted her, one arm beneath her knees, one supporting her back. She cried out. He adjusted. He carried her toward the service elevator. Inside, he set her down gently against the wall. He pulled off his jacket and laid it across her shoulders, didn't wrap it, didn't press it on. He placed it there and let her decide whether to pull it close. She did. It smelled like clean wool and cedar, and the shaking in her chest slowed by 1 degree. His physician, Phelan, worked on Danya for 3 hours that night. Fractured orbital bone, deep bruising across her ribs, lacerations on both wrists, split lip, concussion. Danya woke in a guest room at Onyx's house in Inman Park. The door was open. She could hear a chair creaking softly in the hallway. Someone sitting outside her room. Not inside, outside. She stared at the open door and listened to the sound of someone choosing to stay on the other side of a line he wouldn't cross. The last door she'd walked through tonight had led to a parking garage and a man with zip ties. This door was open, and no one was coming through it unless she asked. 4 days inside Onyx Saran's house. Danya spent most of them in the guest room, sleeping in fragments, waking to pain, orienting herself by the open door she could see from the bed. It was always open. She checked it every morning the way some people check locks. Except she wasn't checking that it was closed. She was checking that it wasn't. On the 3rd day, she tried to walk downstairs alone. The orbital fracture sent a bolt of white-hot pain through her skull when she moved too fast. She grabbed the banister and stood still, breathing through it, furious at her own body for slowing her down. Onyx appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He didn't rush up. He didn't reach for her. He stood there and said, "There's food when you're ready." Then he walked back to the kitchen and let her come down on her own terms. She made it. She sat at the table and ate toast and drank coffee, and neither of them mentioned that it had taken her 4 minutes to get down 12 steps. Tuesday afternoon. Danya was sitting on the back porch watching clouds build over the Atlanta skyline. The air was thick and electric, the kind of southern heat that makes storms feel personal. The first crack of thunder split the sky, and Danya flinched so hard she nearly came out of the chair. Not because of the storm, because loud, sudden sounds had been rewired in her brain to mean Kier's hand was coming. Her arms flew up, her shoulders hunched. She braced for an impact that existed only in her nervous system. Then something warm settled over her shoulders. A blanket, draped from behind. Onyx didn't sit beside her, across her shoulders, and walked back inside like it was the most natural thing in the world. Danya pulled it tight and watched the rain come down and felt something shift inside her chest that had nothing to do with healing bones. That evening, Onyx sat across from her and opened a folder. "I've been investigating Kier for months," he said. "Not because of you, because his firm keeps intersecting with financial networks my people track." He laid it out. Kier's domestic violence defense practice, the one that put his face on billboards and his name on legislation, was engineered to fail. He represented survivors in court and deliberately lost their cases. Missed filing deadlines, suppressed evidence, procedural errors buried so deep they looked like incompetence rather than design. His clients lost custody, lost restraining orders, lost every legal protection they'd come to him begging for. Their abusers walked free, and those abusers were paying for the privilege. 11 men over 5 years. Wealthy, connected Atlanta men who paid Kier to ensure the women trying to escape them never succeeded through the courts. $3.2 million in total, routed through shell billing entries disguised as legal fees. Kier didn't champion victims. He was the lock on the door they thought was opening. Then Onyx slid a second document across the table. Danya's name on Kier's firm records, listed as a paralegal who processed the sabotaged case files. She'd never held that position. She'd never touched those files. Kier had built her into the architecture so that if the scheme surfaced, she'd be the inside operative who destroyed the cases from within. He was the betrayed attorney. She was the traitor. Danya stared at her own name on documents she'd never seen. The social work student in her, the woman who'd spent 2 years studying the systems designed to protect vulnerable people, recognized what Kier had built with clinical precision. It was a machine, and she'd been installed as the part designed to break. She didn't crumble. Something shifted behind her eyes. Something trained and focused and burning. "What else?" she said. They worked through the evenings that followed. Onyx read in the living room while Danya went through case files on the opposite end of the couch. He brought her tea without being asked. One night she fell asleep over the documents. She woke with a blanket draped over her shoulders and the lamp dimmed. She caught herself watching him the next morning. The patience in his hands, the way his jaw held tension even at rest. She looked away. He caught her. Neither spoke about it. Kier appeared on television 5 days after the gala. A press conference outside the courthouse. Manufactured tears, trembling voice. "My fiancé has been missing for nearly a week. I'm begging anyone with information." He wore a purple ribbon. He choked on cue. The anchor called him an advocate now living the nightmare he spent his career fighting. Danya watched from Onyx's living room. Something crystallized. Not broke. Crystallized. The man on that screen tied her to a concrete column and went upstairs to give a speech about believing survivors. He wasn't an advocate. He was a costume wearing a cause. She wasn't the broken one. He was. She went back to the files. Deeper. And the ground gave way. One of Kier's deliberately sabotaged cases, a woman named Fallon Weeks, mother of 2, came to Kier fleeing her abuser, a wealthy developer named Crowell. Kier took the case, sabotaged the custody filing, and Crowell received full custody. 7 months ago, Fallon disappeared. Reported as a runaway. Case closed. Kier signed the legal paperwork granting Crowell uncontested custody of their children without a single investigation. Onyx's people found the rest. A payment, $400,000 from Crowell to Kier, dated 3 days after Fallon vanished. Not a legal fee. A cleanup fee. Fallon didn't run. She was silenced. And Kier, the man whose billboards promised every voice deserves a champion, brokered the transaction that erased hers. Danya closed the file. She stood. She walked into the room where Onyx was reviewing surveillance reports and put Fallon's case on his desk. "She came to him for help," Danya said. Her voice was low and controlled and shaking at its edges. "She trusted him with her children's lives, and he sold her to the man she was running from." Everything she'd held inside broke open. The parking garage, the zip ties, the 11 months of scheduled violence, the women whose lives Kier destroyed while the world pinned ribbons on his chest. She spoke, not screaming. Words, deliberate, devastating. The testimony of a woman who'd been inside the machine and could name every gear. Onyx didn't move. He listened. When she finished, he said, "Good. You have a voice. Use it." Daniel wiped her face. Her jaw set. "I don't want him dead. I want every woman he failed to know the truth. I want every billboard torn down. And I want him sitting in a cell, knowing the woman he tied to a column is the one who buried him." The Atlanta Legal Excellence Awards. 3 weeks out. Annual black tie ceremony at the High Museum of Art. Keir Aldrin receiving the Advocate of the Year award for his domestic violence defense work. The governor, 400 guests, full press. A man who sold survivors to their abusers being honored as their greatest champion. Dania intended to fix that. Onyx's tech specialist, Yael, sharp, methodical, the kind of man who could breach a security network while carrying a conversation about nothing, held a vendor contract with the High Museum through one of Onyx's legitimate fronts. AV access 2 hours before the ceremony. Screens flanking the stage switched mid-presentation. 4 seconds. Dania built the evidence package. 11 sabotaged case files with the deliberate errors highlighted. Missed deadlines, suppressed evidence, procedural failures designed to look like incompetence. Payment records from 11 abusers totaling $3.2 million, routed through shell billing entries. Dania's forged paralegal records beside forensic analysis proving she never touched them. The $400,000 payment from Crowell to Keir dated 3 days after Fallon Weeks disappeared, and audio of Keir threatening Dania captured by Onyx's team from a device planted in the Buckhead penthouse. Then she found the last piece. Files cloned from Keir's home office. A folder labeled Contingency. Inside, fabricated psychiatric evaluations bearing Dania's name. Diagnoses she'd never received from appointments she'd never attended. Manufactured prescription records for medication she'd never taken. A drafted involuntary commitment order dated for next week, signed by a physician on Keir's payroll. An affidavit stating Dania posed a danger to herself. The parking garage wasn't a breakdown in control. It was the opening move. The commitment order was the next step. Dania removed from public life permanently, institutionalized, silenced before she could tell anyone what she'd seen inside his practice. Underneath the commitment order, a life insurance policy. On Dania, $2 million. Keir's contingency had a contingency. If the institution didn't silence her, death would. She added both documents to the evidence package. Her hands didn't shake. Onyx's people dug into Fallon Weeks. Financial trails, property records, communication logs. They found her. Not a body. A woman. Alive. Barely. Held in a rural property outside Atlanta, owned by a shell company connected to Crowell. Not imprisoned by chains, by fear and the knowledge that her children were leverage. If she surfaced, Crowell promised she'd never see them again. Onyx's team extracted her on a Tuesday night. Fallon arrived at the safe house trembling, thin, blinking at rooms that didn't have locked doors like she was learning a new language. Dania held her hands and told her everything. Fallon cried for the first time in 7 months. Not from sadness, from the shock of being believed. Keir wasn't idle. He'd filed a missing persons report. The anguished fiancé, cameras, tears. His connections in the DA's office pressured Onyx's territory. A raid on an Inman Park property. Patrol cars circling the block. Every day Dania stayed hidden was a day Keir's grieving partner narrative grew thicker. The night before the gala, Dania stood on the rooftop of the Inman Park house. Atlanta sprawled below, headlights and glass towers in the low amber haze of a city that celebrated Keir Aldrin without knowing what he did in parking garages. Onyx found her there. He stood beside her, close enough to feel, not touching. "After tomorrow," she said, "every woman he destroyed will know the truth, but knowing doesn't undo it. Fallon lost 7 months. Those 11 women lost their cases. Some of them lost their children." She paused. "I can't give that back." No, Onyx said, but you can make sure it doesn't happen to the next one. She was quiet. Then she said, "Why did you come down to that garage?" Onyx looked out over the city. My mother cleaned hotel rooms for 20 years. She worked in buildings like the one I own now. Men walked past her every day like she was furniture. My father was supposed to be the one who saw her. Instead, he was the one who made her invisible. He paused. She never left because she believed leaving meant losing everything. She was wrong. Staying cost her everything. His jaw tightened. I own that hotel because I swore the places that swallowed my mother would answer to me. And when I heard a sound coming from that garage, I knew what it was before I turned the corner. Because silence has a sound, and I spent my whole childhood learning to hear it. His hand found hers. She held on. They stood above the city until the lights blurred and the night settled. Morning of the gala. Danya dressed in silence. The gown was midnight black, not decoration. Armor. Yael wired the earpiece. Fallon was safe at the house with Onyx's people. Danya walked downstairs. Onyx was waiting. Dark suit, no tie. He saw her and went still. Didn't compliment her. Looked at her like she was the most dangerous thing in Atlanta. She almost smiled. The High Museum of Art. Clean white walls, high ceilings, champagne, 400 guests. Danya entered on Onyx's arm. Whispers spread instantly. People recognized him. People recognized her. The missing fiancée from Keir's tearful press conferences. She was supposed to be fragile, hiding. Instead, she walked through that museum like the walls had been waiting for what she was about to say. Keir saw her from across the gallery. His champagne stopped midair. He crossed toward her, mask assembling in real time. "Danya, my God, sweetheart." Onyx shifted his weight. One movement. Keir's hand froze. Danya looked him in the eye. "You tied me to a column and went upstairs to give a speech about protecting women. Tonight, every person in this room finds out what protection means to you." The lights dimmed. Keir took the stage. Mid-speech, mid-sentence about the sacred duty of advocacy, the screens flanking the stage flickered, went dark, came back. Sabotaged case files, payment records, 11 women's photographs beside the legal failures that destroyed their cases. Fallon Weeks's face. The $400,000 cleanup fee. The fabricated psychiatric evaluations. The commitment order. The life insurance policy. And Keir's voice through every speaker. Recorded, cold, unmistakable. Threatening the woman he told the world he loved. 400 people turned toward the screens. Keir stood on stage with the word advocacy still hanging in the air, and every camera in the High Museum was already rolling. The first satisfying on the screens was Fallon Weeks. Her photograph, holding her 2 children in a park, sunlight on their faces, a woman who still believed the law would protect her. Beside it, Keir's case file. The missed filing deadline circled in red, the suppressed evidence highlighted. A custody battle designed from the inside to collapse. And the $400,000 payment from Crowell, dated 3 days after Fallon vanished from the world. 10 more faces followed, 11 women total. Each photograph beside the case Keir deliberately destroyed. Missed deadlines, buried evidence, legal protections dismantled by the man hired to build them. Payment records from 11 abusers. $3.2 million flowing through shell billing entries into accounts Keir controlled. Danya's forged paralegal records appeared next. Her name on files she'd never touched, beside forensic analysis proving it. The architecture of a frame job built to make the victim look like the villain. The fabricated psychiatric evaluations. The manufactured prescriptions. The commitment order dated for next week. An involuntary institutionalization designed to silence Danya permanently. And beneath it, the life insurance policy. $2 million on a woman whose fiancé had already planned 2 ways to make her disappear. The audio played last. Keir's voice through every speaker in the High Museum, recorded in his own car the night he tied Danya to a concrete column. "You think leaving is an option? You leave when I say you leave. And right now, sweetheart, I say you don't. 400 people heard it. The room didn't gasp. It contracted. The silence was heavier than noise. 400 people processing the distance between the man on the billboards and the voice coming through the speakers. Keir tried the mask. He turned toward a camera with the automatic precision of a man who had talked his way out of every room he'd ever been cornered in. These documents are fabricated. His own voice cut him off. The audio looped. The threat played again, specific, cold, unmistakable. The mask didn't crack. It evaporated. The man behind the billboards stood exposed under gallery lights that offered nowhere to hide. His allies moved first. Legal colleagues excused themselves toward the lobby. Board members from his survivor organizations turned their backs. Politicians who'd posed beside him at press conferences found the exits with practiced speed. Every handshake Keir had ever leveraged dissolved in the time it took the audio to loop a third time. Crowell attempted the service entrance. 2 FBI agents were waiting, positioned since an anonymous evidence package arrived at the Atlanta field office that morning. He walked into them with the expression of a man who'd just realized every exit in the building had been sealed before he arrived. FBI entered the main gallery. 4 agents, calm, unhurried. The inevitability in their pace was worse than urgency. Keir saw them and his shoulders collapsed. He looked across the gallery at Danya, standing in the center of the room, untouched, the screens behind him displaying his destruction while 400 witnesses watched. And the man who'd built his career on the word advocacy couldn't find a single word that would save him. They cuffed him beside his own award plaque, past every camera, past 400 people who would never hear his name without tasting the lie underneath it. The flashbulbs didn't stop. Danya stood in the center of the High Museum. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She breathed, deep, full, using ribs that still remembered a parking garage floor. The first breath in 11 months that belonged entirely to her. 6 months later, a reclaimed office building in Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward. A sign above the door. The Fallon Weeks Legal Defense Fund. Free independent case audits for domestic violence survivors, ensuring the lawyers they trust are actually fighting for them. Founded by Danya Voronova. She ran it with the steady precision of a woman who'd seen the system from inside the machine and knew exactly where the gears were rigged. She sat across from women who'd placed their lives in the hands of attorneys and got betrayal instead of protection. She audited cases, flagged sabotage, connected survivors with lawyers who fought for real. Fallon Weeks was reunited with her children 3 months after Crowell's arrest. She brought them to the defense fund on opening day. Her daughter held her hand. Her son carried a drawing, a house with a big door and the word home in crayon across the top. Fallon pinned it to the bulletin board in the front office. It stayed there. Keir Aldrin, 29 years, fraud, conspiracy, 11 counts of obstruction, accessory to kidnapping, domestic battery. Crowell, 22 years, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, custody fraud, 11 civil suits filed by the women whose cases Keir destroyed. Every billboard in Atlanta bearing his face was taken down within a week. Onyx walked into the defense fund on a quiet afternoon. The tension that lived in his frame was softer. He'd restructured, stepped back, investing in transitional housing across the Old Fourth Ward. He found Danya in the front office. She turned to him. That Tuesday at your house, the thunderstorm. First crack of thunder and I flinched so hard I almost fell out of the chair. She paused. I was bracing. Because loud sounds have meant pain for so long, my body doesn't know the difference between thunder and a fist. Her eyes were bright. You didn't say anything, didn't sit down. You draped a blanket over my shoulders from behind and walked back inside. Like protecting me from small things was just something you did. She swallowed. Every man I've known made my fear feel like a burden. You covered my shoulders and kept walking. That's when I knew. Onyx stepped forward. Danya closed the distance. The kiss was hers, her choice, her moment. Not because he saved her, Because he cut zip ties in a parking garage and never made her feel like she owed him for it. Because he draped a blanket during a thunderstorm and understood that the smallest gesture is sometimes the one that finally breaks through. A federal holding cell. Keir Aldrin on a thin mattress. Plexiglass TV. The anchor's voice. The Fallon Week's Legal Defense Fund today celebrated the successful audit of its 50th case. Founder Danya Voronova spoke at the ceremony, calling the fund proof that advocacy means nothing without accountability. Keir stared at the screen. Advocacy. The word he built his empire on. Now it belonged to the woman he tied to a column. His hand found the remote. He turned it off. The cell went quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't lift. He sat in it. And he lived with it. If this story hit somewhere you weren't ready for, let it land. Share this with someone who needs to hear that being tied down isn't a bribe. Ring that bell and be here when the next one drops. It's coming. And it burns.